Hello, everyone. You should be able to hear me. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Andy McSweeney of Andy McSweeney Photography and Photo Tour Bruges up in the Andy Attic / the Photo Tour Bruges headquarters. We're going to be doing photo feedback tonight on the second live feed that I've ever. I'm still getting used to looking at the camera too. Hey, I got photos in front of me and the whole thing. Hope you are all well, and thank you for tuning in. If you are tuning in, I see one whole viewer. Hello, viewer. I hope you are also enjoying these live streams. This is the second one. Last time I did Ask Andy Anything on photography. And, well, it was nice to see some people there and some questions asked. So that was nice. It's also nice when the wife turns off the music. Thank you. Yes, the wife is in the corner to read your questions if you have them as we go through this. Over the last couple of weeks, I've quietly asked for your photo feedback, and I've gotten just a little bit. So we're going to look at that, and hope it's enjoyed, boys and girls. Okay, well, the magic of the moment, I think, for all of this is that we're going to jump right into it. What more can I say aside from please share this on your feed if you have a friend who might enjoy photography, or if you're a friend who might enjoy their photography. Oh boy, I got to get used to this in the smooth way. All right, let me switch cameras so you don't have to see my ugly mug quite so much. That should do it. Yes. Opening words of this live cast is like everything I like to do in photography, and that's to remind you to love everything in photography. Creativity, heart, and passion is one side of the coin where you are making the art and speaking from the soul. Right there is what I'm talking about. And also I'm talking about the practical side of love. That is the other side of the coin where you make the effort, care in one way or another, or just, hang around the scene 2 minutes, do the edit, do what you have to do to take that photo home. That is said and done. Now we can progress from there. Boys and girls, we're going to do our first feedback, which is, he says, switching screens, from Ricky, sending in this fine photo, showing how this photo ended up on his wall, and this fine photo. Ricky was a guest here on my photo tour a couple times, and it was nice seeing him. His family comes over regularly from the UK, and that's always nice. I'm not going to give up his privacy more than that. I'm just going to give you context and some story to make this entertaining beyond just ripping into photos, boys and girls. You know I do this on the loose and try to have some fun. So without further ado, why don't we see what we can think about Ricky's photos and what I might change about them. Well, I like all three photos. This is a nice personal story, and I love, when you get personal stories in your photography. I also love the framing itself. There's a nice tight angle going on here, so there's no waste around the story, and all the way down to the depth of field and the focus. He's driving me right to where he wants that story to be. So I think that is good that Ricky did that because it makes for a nice photo. Next to that, I like the bright air of it all. I'm looking at this for the first time too, guys. I like to look at these fresh. Yeah, I like that there's, a light feel to this. You could expose this darker, as I suppose I can show you by doing something like this with the exposure. But that nice, light, airy feeling is desirable, I think, in this personal moment. If I felt otherwise, I could, of course, play with the exposure like you're seeing there. But I could also just play with the highlights and then bring the toning just overall to a flatter tone. We're not going to do that, though. We're going to do maybe the one thing I might do to this photo, which is, and I'll pull up the mouse so you can see this. Gang, this is in Adobe Lightroom, of course. There's other editing software, and we'll talk about that in an Ask Andy Anything situation later. But I hope you can see I am at the vignetting part of the editor. And that means that I could add a little more intimacy by just adding a vignette. So you see, taking it really hardcore, that has a more intimate feeling and just drives again to the center of the photo and the wording and obviously the tip of the hands. And if I went the other way, I could do it like that. I'm not a big fan of this personally, so I'm going to take it down to that. And I'm not even going to take it down that hard. I'm going to go to, let's call it -40, which is a bit intense. But you can see I can also play with my midpoint. And actually, to add some natural feeling back to the vignetting that I'm applying, I could go the highlights at the bottom and bring that up so it's not fully just that, dark circle that a vignette could kind of look a little too aggressively like. So that's all well and good. And how about that? Yep, keep those highlights to 100. Oh, and I should mention while we're here, gang, of course you can play with the roundness. I'd go more like that. So, before and after, before and after, and obviously down to taste, just like anything in the arts, and photography is certainly part of that. Oh, and one more thing I might change on this, Ricky, just to warm it up a little further. You might want to play with the white balance a little bit. Let's start a bit aggressively by going to 15 on this JPEG. That's got something to consider compared to that. Oops. Yep. But in this case, instead of going for the colder blue vibe here, I'm going to go to, let's say, a middle ground of 8. That I think works well. Again, all down to taste. If you want to kind of transmit that cool feeling, you might want to sit on the blue side of things. But I think this has a really nice warm vibe and moment to it. So I'd go for just a little more on the what's-my-jig, on the temperature or the white balance. So that's the first photo out of the way. Just popping around to see. Yes, people are indeed watching. Hello, people. Thank you for watching. Okay, Ricky has given in his first of 3 photos sent over. The second was taken in Bruges. I believe the first one was too. I won't call up his email and give away too much of what we chatted about. Yes, Ricky took this photo of our beautiful city of Bruges from the Historium Tower on the Market Square, because in the last year they've opened it up to the public. So you can include a nice little view and possibly a photo from that. There is the Market Square view, but Ricky chose to go for something else, which I think is kind of interesting, and I like something different, so this is kind of interesting. There's obviously a lot of life and color going on here, because, well, it's especially into the sunset and things are going to get a little bit contrasty. I believe I should be able, in the library module, to see what lens this was shot on. Or what am I talking about? Let's go back to the editor, press information. We're at 21 millimeters on, we don't have much more beyond, this is a 21 millimeter, I'm going to assume, on a crop system. Well, Ricky and others who are taking photos like this and might want some feedback on it. I like it overall. It's really into the sun, so it does get a little bit gritty in the colors and some of the contrasts involved. It's all down to taste, obviously, but for me, that can look a little rough for me and my love of like richer, smoother tones going on. But overall, I like what you did with this, considering the situation. If we go over here to that little building, I'd say this looks a little bit funky just in the way that the blue is kind of discolored. So going down or fixing it, I could take out a brush tool and then, whoops, what am I doing? It's stage nerves, so my friend, enjoy. Yeah, I could do that with the old brush tool, with the exposure set to 1.0, and you can see then when I go to a wide shot, it doesn't look quite as disorientating as before, or distracting. And actually overall with this scene, once we hit that, well, you could consider you could consider that the white balance is a little bit contrasty and just a little funky all around, man. And obviously you don't want those distractions in color toning and such to take away with the story you're telling. I mean, in simple black and white terms, if I took the saturation all the way out here, that lets me focus on more of the texture of the buildings and everything else, as well as obviously the hills and mountains in the background. So that's all well and good. But here, because you have, let me just fix that. There, of course. There we go. Yep, because you have not too many colors, but quite a few colors going on, you're going to want to kind of watch things a little bit. And what I do in this case, just absorbing the image, I could think about breaking out the brush tool and going to all these houses and brushing them over, not for the brightness, but let's just get an area to show everyone. Yep, we could do that. We could do that. Let's say all that, especially where it's got that blue. You know, I just talked about colors. So look out for that blue. Let that zen of blueness hit you, and make sure you're not taking out a swimming pool or something. And just from these loose examples, so we have some for contrast. Well, even if we take out the exposure factor that this brush is set up to at the moment, if I now go to my saturation with the selective tool, I'm making those buildings white. You can see, kids, if I go to the extremes, that blueness that's kind of hovering over, like, if I'm going to be technical here, a bit of off-white balance compared to the bright areas or the sunny areas, that could be distracting, especially when you get to the, I don't know, snobbier, higher levels of photography. So, Ricky, my friend, you would either want to go through all those and take out the blue as you see fit. There is a little trick that I think is worth pointing out, that if we go to our color and we select blue, and then we go to its saturation, then you can see in a shot like this, since the blue is fairly limited to the industrial area, and things that, you know, look like they shouldn't be blue, I can just cheat by taking out the blue saturation selectively and then do that. And then if we compare that to there, that to there. It's a good shot, not quite my taste as how it all worked out and everything. As far as the composition goes, mate, I'm happy you didn't put the horizon in the middle like so many do in the early days, and sometimes tempted in the later days. But composition-wise, if it helps, just going from technical to that, maybe a little more sun next time. Maybe just a little more so that round ball that I can see on this shot isn't quite so clipped off. But not bad. And you liked it enough that you put it on the wall at home. You sent me it, so it's going on the show. Hope you don't have to print it again now that the blue might bug you. All right, last photo from Ricky for the photo feedback here with myself, Andy McSweeney of Andy McSweeney Photography and Photo Tour Bruges. Hello, hi. Gotta plug it every now and then so we can justify all this. Ricky, with his love of Bruges, gave us this photo, which I think looks rather nice. Just going to make sure everything's showing on the screen. Yes, it is indeed. Good. Okay, boys and girls, kids of all ages, what would I do to this photo? Or at least what do I think of this photo as a jumping off point for feedback? Well, it's Bruges, so automatically I'm going to like it a bit. I mean, this place is absolutely beautiful, and if you haven't been here, then you are missing out. Please come by our gorgeous city once the world stops spinning so hard and lockdowns ease. We are beautiful pretty much all year round, and this particular situation is by the Lake of Love in the Behainhof area, if you will, to put it loosely. This is a real nice historic corner, and it's nice that last year for the Christmas period of 2019 that the city of Bruges did a light festival, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Ricky saw this and made some effort, and it paid off because he got a nice little shot of our gorgeous city at night during Winter Glow, the name of the fest. What I would do in this case, and I should say before we start that I'm working from a JPEG, as you can see in the top left corner, so I won't have the flexibility of a RAW that I would have normally with the RAW. Well, boys and girls, with this shot overall, to start with the composition, I think it's perfectly fine. I mean, there's some interesting elements, and I think it's nice, clear, and straight. The horizon isn't in the middle, because it doesn't have to be, and I think it would work against this kind of photo. It is a little hard to grasp what's going on in the sense of the darkness that's taken over this photo a little bit aggressively. So what I might do as a starting point is think about making it a little bit brighter. Just see, you know, the difference from one to the other directly, and see if you're telling the story of that beautiful city and its light festival, including this year, 2020. Yes, not all things are bad, some things go on, like Winterglow Festival, apparently. So, with pulling up the exposure so much, as in this case 2.37 on the exposure dial, let's make it an even 259. Yeah, you thought I'd be even Stevens. Yes, then I can go to the highlights and turn it from around 0 all the way through, and still, you know, not blow out those areas of interest that are going on, and if anything, just accentuate what's going on inside those highlight areas. So, you know, those two simple steps, even on a reasonably sized JPEG from a good DSLR camera, you know what I'm talking about, something more than your compact with a good size sensor, you're going to be able to pull out these results and go from this that the camera may have shot or yourself and take it up to that pretty fast. So that I think works out, and then you can fiddle from there. Taking up the shadows could also be interesting in this particular scenario. You can see, working from a JPEG and only at 5 megabytes, like I asked you guys to send in, that when we go close, we're going to pay a lot on pixel fidelity, if you will, and noise and all that stuff that camera nerds nerd out about. But we get to see what we're looking at, and if you're not printing big, if this is just for the home screen and you, you know, savor this instead of peeking at the pixels too worryingly, well, then you're going to have something that I think works out just a little bit more vibrant, alive, and telling the story you want to tell. But good composition, Ricky. I like this, and I like this shot, and as you know, I like this city. One thing I might say, just as I've pulled up the sensors, I see a weird little line here. I don't know if you guys are seeing that on the quality of this live feed, but hopefully you are. It is maybe indicating that your sensor is starting to hit some age, so just look out for that, mate, or contact your camera company and just make sure that that warranty isn't wasted. So things to think about, and I thank Ricky for his feedback. Let's take a look over at the feed and see if anyone's asking questions. Jammer van de gewoon vlek onderaan. Bedankt, Karin, I think. I can't think of anything in Flemish right now, so I'm just going to take that as good. All right, boys and girls, feel free to leave comments and ask questions about, I don't know, feedback and what you do in editing if something's not working out. I can show you from examples here. This is also where, for this photo feedback session, and my very first one at that I have to let you know that aside from the photos the wife sent me that I couldn't load on the computer because the whole software thing was acting funky. Sorry, dear, I'll get you later. I have no other photo feedback to offer you because nobody else sent in photos for feedback. So, ladies and gentlemen, send photos for feedback. Please do. You can go over to this live feed on my page here on Facebook, Andy McSweeney Photography, which is it's facebook.com/Andy McPhoto. Drop a photo into comments and I'll try and pull it up on screen and let you know. I did realize that this could happen because it's only our second broadcast. I mean, you can hear I'm just barely keeping all this together a little bit. And since we have an hour ahead of us, I thought I would ask you some interesting things for your feedback Jesus, that made no sense. Yeah, I thought I would fill the time and keep the vibe of photo feedback going by pulling up one of my old photo folders and ripping through some photos of Paris that we were blessed to have a nice weekend in the January of 2016, from Bruges to Paris with love. So, last week we talked about cropping through all these photos, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm going to pull up photos that I gave a good solid one pass when I got back and, did my editing thing with them before sharing them on socials, finding some use for them in one way or another. But we're going to talk about Andy's photos for a little bit so that you can get some ideas for your photos. And feel free to send them in the comments. This is all live show, so it's very surreal for me, but it means that we can do things live, like see your photos. You're going to have to do them through Andy McSweeney photography live feed of this episode, though, because I probably won't see them otherwise between all the buttons and clicking I'm doing around. Oh, and before we get to Paris, just real quick, when we go back to Ricky's photo here, because you can still see it on the big screen. Yeah. What's interesting is this is just what I pulled out from here, let me just go back. Thank you. From that, by messing around a little bit with the exposure and the highlights. Now, before we get into Paris, kids, let me go to some of the photos I took at the Winter Glow. There's this one, which was a different night. I wasn't with Ricky, but you can see it's a similar scene. Now, obviously, the composition changes up, and we could talk about that for photo feedback. But I want to point out that when you're talking about pulling something out of the photo to the fullest degree, I started with this, which, if we just reset that real quick, is this. So I went from that all the way real quick, tidy, and clean to that. And then, if you want to talk about how I did that, that's because I'm shooting in RAW. Look up at the top left corner and you can see NEF, which is the RAW format for Nikon cameras. You've probably seen it if your camera has it as an option, and it means that you can shoot 3 times the data per photo. It doesn't mean a bigger photo, it just means a deeper photo, like exactly in this case, where I've taken the highlights down to -100 and the shadows up to 100. Excuse me. Excuse me, the weather is changing here. Yes, boys and girls, you can see that with some messing around that I was able to manipulate this RAW considerably more. And when we zoom into the pixel down there on the dirty up close level, there is obviously some noise and some muck to sort out, but it's a little cleaner. So we're thinking about going back to one of last week's questions also about JPEG versus RAW. This is a situation for RAW, and you can see the benefits. Now, again, before we go to Paris, and to fill up some time over the next little hour, because this is the live show and you got to start somewhere. How did I get to here from there, even though I had already manipulated the RAW a little bit? Well, that is using a program called Color Efex Pro. It's made by Nick Collection, which is owned by DxO, to give you the full lineage there. This is, essentially after editing software, which means that, I want to push around the image a little more deeply and profoundly, maybe at the cost, going back to that whole zoomy thing, of a little noise compared to my original, but at the same time getting more detail than my original. So before we go to Paris, mes amis, I'm just going to take this image, and if everything goes right, I can edit it in Color Efex Pro View. I'm going to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. I'm going to make sure this is all showing up on screen for vous, because that would be nice. Hopefully, yes. Yep, it looks like it. Yep, look at that. Now, this Nick collection is an interesting one. Just for those of you who don't know it, it's a software suite that takes it beyond the basic editing. I'm using the Color Effects module, which has all sorts of fancy features. And you can see I have a few presets set up for that. This is just the Color Effects module. And frankly, guys and girls and otherwise, if you like it, do think about giving it a purchase. It's, I believe, only about $80. And DxO has taken ownership of it very, very well. It's had a couple owners, so, you know, that's a story on its own. But when I'm in this Color Effects module, let's see. I can do all sorts of things, like start with a particular filter, do stuff like that. I can go to a detail extractor, which gets us somewhere close to where we were on that photo I showed you a little while ago. But saving us some time, I can also save recipes, which in this case has a landscape default for landscape defaulting. And you can see on the other side here, I've used the tonal contrast to boost around the highlights, play with the midtones and otherwise, setting it to fine on contrast type because I have a couple of options there, like you should be seeing in your home. And then I go to detail extraction because without it, I find the photo doesn't extract as much detail and add that extra layer of texture that I feel this photo particularly deserves. Whoops, why did we save that? We already have a copy here in Lightroom. Oh, well. Yep, that'll give me a second to pop over and see what's going on. 9 viewers. Hello. Gee, the show is growing by the second. Cha-cha-cha. Guys and gals and otherwise, this is Andy's photo feedback session for those of you tuning in while the image saves and we get to all that. Hope you enjoy this. It's happening on the regular every 2 weeks. In fact, in October, we might even jump to weekly. I'm still figuring that out, so stay tuned for that. And it's all a very fun experience so far. I see little in comments, so I can just focus on the photo tips for you. As I said, it is a photo feedback session. However, we have already gone through the one entry sent by Ricky because it's early days, so we're still getting your attention for entries. But that meant that I could show you how you can take an image that's already like this and go like this if you're just tuning in right now. And having said all that and promised you Paris, trust me, boys and girls, I could bore you all night with some of the photos of the beautiful Bruges and the Winter Glow Light Festival, which will be happening this Christmas 2020. If all goes good. But I promised you Paris, so let's just dig through a little of Andy's collections, which are, of course, how you organize your photos, or at least we hope so, in Lightroom. I'm just going to go to, Paris. And I'm going to go to 2016 faves. Since you didn't bother sending me more than one entry of feedback, I have to feedback my own work. So you're going to see some of my work from Paris. Before we get into that, though, in an organized way, or at least we try here on Andy McSweeney Photography Live. Boys and girls, you go traveling, you pick out your winners, which, as I talked about on Ask Andy Anything, involves maybe putting some flags to choose out the favorites, maybe putting some extra stars for the very favorites, and maybe color coding them so you have your absolute favorites there. And when you're talking about Paris, you're going to get a decent haul. I mean, it's a gorgeous city, and Mrs. Andy and I were doing low season from Photo Tour Bruges and Life in Bruges by going to Paris in the dead of January. It got us a nice haul, and don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with all of this. You can see they're extremely disorganized, and Mrs. Andy is sneezing all over the place. So we're going to see the payoff of doing a little organizing beforehand and go from our 637 photos down to a slightly more sly, let's put 5 stars out there, 100 or so. Don't worry, we're going to zip through these. We're not going to be here all night. Boys and girls, kids of all ages, this is what I do when I get the chance here is Andy McSweeney Photography, and sometimes his Photo Tour Bruges. It's usually out there on tour, but I am doing a little more feedback here and there, and I have in past also. Been kind of negligent about this, but let's rip apart these photos, shall we? Let's open up with the view of our fine apartment in Paris and hide the info on the photos. I should say also that I've gone through these photos, but it's about 4 years ago, right after the holiday. And, you know, I took a quick look and reorganized them a little bit for this show so it wouldn't be too boring or random, boys and girls. But this is where we get into the feedback side of things when you look at your photography, where you've already fixed the obvious stuff and now you're looking for the extra stuff. So I think some of these will be fine, and I'll talk about how I edited them up. And also we're going to look out for the stuff that isn't fine and just see what we can do about making it more fine. So with that all said, and seeing that we're not losing viewers too hard, let's keep going. Let me just open up with that view of our lovely Airbnb in Paris. I'm sure the wife is, yep, she's looking pretty happy about that. We have to get to Paris again. You can see at nighttime it was rather beautiful. And, you know, on feedback side of things, I'd say I'd be more happy having run this through Color Effects Pro than I would have just leaving it at the raw. For my tastes, I think getting into the detail and color there really brings out the texture of the story. I would say this is getting a little bit funky, just off the obvious side of things. Why don't we just zoom back a little? There we go. Yeah, this would have been worth bracketing my shot a little further to maybe get the exposure correct for this kind of multi-textured photo. I gotta say also that when we zoom in, and this happens a lot when you push the processing on a photo, you see that extra little glow that's going on when my hand is on screen. Well, that kind of thing you might end up opening up Photoshop just to edit out if you're really going to go for it and, you know, not leave it to screen size where you want it nice and big and perfect for, say, a gallery show. I think if there was a gallery show, it would probably be that one, though. That was just a beautiful morning. And I have nothing to complain about on this photo. I think it all worked out rather well. And as it happens, it was also on my birthday. So that was nice. That particular week in Paris, the fog was heavy, and I think that is a reasonable photo of it. In fact, it was in the news, and the metros were free because the weather was quite so funky. Whoops, we don't want to go to a book module. Ladies and gentlemen, let's look at what I did on the photo. Now, I talked about feedback. Overall, this photo's pretty much done as far as I can tell. I'm happy to just let you peek backstage and see what the original photo looked like. Ooh, fortunately not too embarrassing. Well, you can see already by pushing down the highlights, pulling up the shadows, messing with the blacks, and the texture clarity for this shot worked out really nice. I could say I went a little bit aggressive on the texture, but I think in this case it worked out. I'd have to really zoom in and just double inspect that before printing. That's something Adobe's put out in the last year for Lightroom, and I'm just feeling it out. But it seems to really make textures pop. And of course, the standard clarity feature that we all call standard when we like to make the photo pop. Just that little bit on, you know, I don't know, contrasty sharpness. Well, I've boosted that up a little bit aggressively because as you can see, it works out fine without even being active. But for what I'm shooting and how I like to shoot it, in this particular case, I'm going to get aggressive and put it up to plus 41. Next to that, I haven't done too much. I haven't even introduced a vignette, which can add that extra air of intimacy. If anything, you can see in this kind of way that it does take out what little detail is in those building shadows, and also adds that fake vignette look, or at least unfinished, I don't know, off vignette look that probably isn't doing you any favors. You might be able to play a little bit with things and get it going on with midpoint and all that, and of course playing with the highlights. But in this case, I don't think we need any particular extras to that. Obviously, the black and white speaks a little more than color, as we can see by comparison. Moody, a little more heavy. Hard contrast from those shiny, sharp buildings to the soft, foggy buildings that are going on in beautiful Paris. Bon, on continue. Je parle très bien français. Vous voulez que je parle français tout le feedback peut-être? Ook in Vlaams. Ik kan een beetje meer praten Vlaams, mijn friends. Oh, my friends. Ooh, that slipped into German. Yes, don't talk Flemish on air just yet. Boys and girls, continuing on and showing you some pair shots that I love and maybe could be worthy to think about for feedback or what we can do. I love this shot of a little statue mannequin in Paris. It worked out very, very nicely, and I actually have a couple of alternates of it. If I was looking at the three that I took while spotting this scene and parking up, I'd say that this one was my winner because of the perfect silhouette of somebody walking and just, you know, working out well. The scarf, the hat, the skin tone over there, all that just played exactly to, I think, what makes this photo work. And obviously on the technical end, let's take a look. I'm shooting that at 1/60th of a second, but also at f4. So I'm keeping my aperture nice and low. And I'm also standing close to it, even though I'm zooming a bit, so that I get that nice soft depth of field. I should say also, as I think I've said before already on air, this is the kind of shot where I'd definitely do a test shot just to see what my depth of field looks like already, if this was going to be something that caught my heart like this particular shot. Editing-wise, you can see the usual games and tricks are going on. You can see also I have some very rich colors going on. This is part of why I like using Fujifilm cameras. Their sensors and the little modifications they do to really make it shine work really well with colors and black and white. It's not always flawless and reproduced perfectly, but for a lot of the shine and glow that I like to give color in my work, I find it works well. You can see, and you can do this on any camera over in Lightroom or other software. Go to the camera profile and pick something out. Here, if I go to Adobe Color, it's a little more flat compared to that. But if I went to, say, Adobe Landscape, that could have a nice richness that plays well for this kind of shot and the kind of mood I'm going for. I have noticed that when I do color profiles off of the camera, whether it's the Fuji system I use often or the Nikon system full frame that I use often, the film simulations or, you know, color profiles, if you will, they all tend to work really, in a lot of cases, I don't know, maybe not, well, I just find they just add a little more texture and richness to the shot you're working in Lightroom. I'm going to be checking out more software over the next year beyond Lightroom, so stay tuned for a nerd report on that. But for now, we're in Lightroom and we're using this nice color profile, which is rich but not too vibrant. And you can see, just to boost things up a little more, I went to vibrance and saturation and pushed that up. Because, no offense or nothing, but taking that back down to 0, I think just takes out some of the extra little life and amour that I'm looking for in that scene. So that's the after, and that's the before. All down to taste. My taste is nice and rich and colorful for that. Okay, onwards from there. Part of why I like street photography, things and life and just stuff that you can put together. I think also it's worth showing that this is a series of 2, which I like quite a lot. The value of standing there for 10 seconds, my friends. There's that. And you can see overall, I think it all worked out. I'd say this guy, as you zoom in, is a little blurry. Now, with street photography, you always get a little more allowance from the viewer if they know what they're talking about, I'd like to think. Because street happens so fast, sometimes you just, catching it as quick as you can. Personally, I don't mind it. I'm a little more bothered actually that he's out of focus. You can see I got the richness and texture going on with the tapestry of the canvas, but he's actually out of focus. So as a, super nerd, is that correct or not? That's a little less about the motion and a little more about not nailing it or predicting what's going on. So that's a little boo-boo against me. And then on the other side of things, even though it's not exactly breaking the shot, this lady is also out of focus. Yep. You can see again, I've got a good richness, texture. Even a little bit less. Looks like the lens was knocked out there. And Andy screwed up by not getting her in focus. Obviously, the focus point had other plans at that particular moment. So yeah, I can't rip into your photos if I don't rip into myself, guys. This is things that I have not gotten quite right on a shot that might be fine for Instagram or little social media, but I wouldn't exactly print up huge, especially if I was super picky about my photos, which is part of the fun. And moving on from there, let me just do this. Yeah. Let's play with this shot. Oh, that looks lovely. A nice madame in one of the parks in a corner of Paris. I'm pretty happy with this shot overall. I think everything played out fairly well. I think if we go into the editing side of things, the usual tricks, film simulation going on, little tweaks and changes on the exposure. If we didn't do that, well, already she'd be getting a little bit too dark for that visibility, which I think no one wants. And I resisted the urge to go up on the shadows and bring in more of that greenery because, frankly, she's the main story I'm going for. So I think everything worked out fairly well there. I would mention it could be worth my while just brush stroking over a couple of regions to bring out a little more character and story. So this is using the brush tool in Adobe Lightroom. You saw I started to go over the black, and now I am just hitting erase and undoing that. That is because for this particular shot, I think it's going to bring out graininess and doesn't really add anything to the story. So if I brighten up the brush there, and let's say there, and then go in, hold down Alt so that I have the eraser tool active instead of the brush, and just clean up my mess. We have something that can work out and just catch the eye a little more than that. And why don't we see what's backstage fully? Oh, look at that. I actually got it all in frame. I thought I'd crop this one aggressively. Woohoo! Had the right lens at the right moment. Lucky me. Yep, 200 millimeters. Okay, boys and girls, moving on. Hope this helps. A nice little wandering moment in Paris. I think everything worked out fine. I'm not going to put in the most embarrassing shots for my own feedback, even if I am ripping myself a new one. But I think this serves its purpose, even if it's not the most particularly thrilling photo. I think there's a nice sense of symmetry, if I may take credit for my own work, from the little birdie up in the top right corner to the young lady to her shadow carrying down the screen. I, of course, applied a nice black and white profile from my Fujifilm Particular Tastes, and for this one, bashed up that clarity real aggressive because I wanted a nice, sharp, detailed feeling to that. Do be careful, obviously, when you knock the clarity up that high. You're going to, before printing, want to go in there and make sure you didn't do too much damage. And do remember that quick demo I showed you at the beginning of the shoe where I opened up Nick Collection's Color Effects Pro so I could further enhance what was in the photo. Now, this all works out well and fine. I think if we are comparing to color, yeah, there ain't much contest there. This looks a little bit nothing exciting, but sometimes all it takes is to suck out the color to bring in the story. And there you are, I think, reasonable here. If I was nitpicking, and I guess that's what feedback involves, well, I guess I could, again, just go to a few details on this young lady without causing a halo around her from where I missed my brush strokes, and just bring that out a little. What I could also do, just in the sense of symmetry, is maybe crop in a little bit and then reframe so that that bird doesn't get stuffed in a corner. But if we look opposite the bird down our frame, yeah, maybe more like that, we might reach a little more symmetry by just cropping and reframing a little. Although in this case, I don't think it's doing much. Okay, hope that helped, and maybe just a little bit brighter too. Don't need to be dreary. Let's move on to the next photo. Madame in Paris, voila. She is walking and I am shooting, and she is walking and I am shooting. This shot has worked out assez bien, and I think it is all right. When we go in for the kill on the zoom, we see that there is not super great levels of detail, unless recording live is really slowing down my computer. Yep. Look at that. We're getting a little bit of resolution bump, but Madame is out of focus. This photo is going nowhere, and what a shame for it, because maybe it had potential otherwise. This photo has a lot of potential, and we can see already without zooming in that the sharpness is assez bien, in fact, très bien. That means good enough, in fact, quite good. So this is a fun little street scene that I think worked out well. The usual tricks apply, some clarity, some texture aggressively in this case. I'd revisit those before the final print, but I think they make it pop on screen. And of course, nice black and white filter from the Fuji kind. That is, once again, because in color, it's got something, but I think this has got more. Continuing on through Paris, my friends, and getting on to a little street photography. La photographie de la rue. Well, you can see I was perching above and watching people. And this scene, I think, somehow came together. This is certainly a scene where color gets distracting, so we go straight to black and white. And you can see when we get to the corner, we have this fella looking at these fellas, oh, young lady and maybe fella, or maybe young lady, or who cares, because it made for a story and the shadow accentuate that there are people and people. I think this photo is okay, but I left it in here when I looked at these quickly to be able to say don't use this photo. As we saw when we zoomed in on the elder man, that he is not in focus. And also I think this photo is just a little too spread out. It suffers from too many elements in the frame and trying too many things at once, as I'm seeing it. Also, I have to remember that with the bright area of the frame going to be catching my eye most likely, well, it's nice that it brings me to these feet, but that ain't particularly exciting. And frankly, I don't think we need to zoom in to see that first and foremost, the branches are in focus and not the people down there, which are a little more exciting on the story. If we go to the next photo, though, then we get something a little more interesting. I'm tempted to say it all in French. What can I say? I don't get practice. Je suis de Montréal, je parle deux langues. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Well, friends, yes, you can see that compared to the other shot, we have zoomed in on the story a lot more extensively. Look at that compared to that. I mean, now we've got something going on as far as a narrative and a proper little bit of, I don't know, français, la vie française. I also can now say that things are in focus, and that ain't just the autofocus doing its job. It's the framing being pulled in so tight. I can't see what he's looking at, but I get him looking into the empty gap, so I think that all works well. And if I look at how I edited this, wow, I didn't even have to change the lighting. I'm just making sure. Yep, I'm going to my brush tool and seeing that I didn't change a thing on this one. So la-di-da for me, the lighting was working out. I could, of course, go in and bring out a little more to him and maybe some to his friend. But actually, I kind of liked it before. And it's kind of satisfying to get it right off camera to a level you're happy with. So that's feedback from myself, Andy McSweeney, to myself, Andy McSweeney, since Not enough of you sent in photos for feedback. Look out for these feedback sessions. They are going to be happening. And, well, I'm always most brutal on myself, so I'll keep giving you the honesty. But if you hear me scream, cuss, or really say it's crap, that's only because I know they're my own photos. And please make sure to like the page, Andy McSweeney Photography, as well as check out my YouTube page, Andy McSweeney Photography, which is youtube.com/Andy McPhoto, right up in the corner of your screen, which is also my Instagram, as is my photo tour, and so on, to plug myself. Okay, we still have a couple of viewers, and even if not, I guess it makes for a solid session. Let's get back to Paris. Yep, we have those big stairs that a lot of us know as we go into the Montmartre area. I've just played around fairly straightforward here. I don't think much to say. With the color versus black and white factor, it's a bit of a 50-50, but I think black and white pulls off a little bit better. With a lot of street photography, I don't tend to edit things. I think that, you know, having that little bit of garbage there, even though it breaks the texture and pattern and, you know, draw of the eye possibly, I think it's part of the scene, and that's part of where street photography just sort of resonates for me. If I wasn't thinking that, well, then obviously I could go in with the old swap-see replace-see tool and do that, and then not have that distraction in the corner. And then I could actually say the same thing for this right on the corner of the frame. Got to watch that so it doesn't sample the wrong area, as Lightroom tends to do. But you can see there, kids, 2 less distractions in the scene compared to before. All down to taste. I like to leave it pure and natural. I don't think this photo really screams out success, to be totally honest. So I don't know if I'd be putting this in a gallery show or anything. But it gives you guys ideas and it fills up the time. Any questions going on? I'm just going to check at the big screen. No? Okay, we're all good. Hi again, Karine. Thank you. All right. Tell you what, kids, I'm just going to browse away. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, but I have to make sure I'm not missing any potential comments from you folks on my photo tour Bruges, because it live feeds to there. Oh, look at that. I was missing one. I see one from Chris. All right. We're going to take a question, and then we'll flip through some of these Paris photos. I think I made it a bit long, too, so we'll start skipping through some of the more exciting Paris photos. Chris. Hi, mate. Hello, Chris. I've been trying various software out over the last week to see if there's anything I like to replace Lightroom Classic. Needless to say, the answer was I didn't, although I'm considering purchasing Topaz Denoise AI, which works wonders compared to Lightroom noise reduction. All right. That is not a question, but a very interesting statement. Good on you, Chris, for keeping your options open and looking beyond the obvious stuff with Adobe and Lightroom. And actually, I'd say to add to that list, you might want to take a good look. I had forgotten on the last episode, so I had to look it up first thing after we went off air. Skylum. Skylum, formerly known as MacFun, is a really good Lightroom alternative by the looks of it, and one of the ones I'm going to be diving into as this fine year of 2020 wraps up. It seems to be very comprehensive. It has extra features that I also find interesting, maybe not for you or me, but for some of our dear listeners, where you can do sky replacement, or you have auto adjust buttons that are saving you a lot of time on the edit and pretty flexible on how they move quickly. And yeah, I'd say keep looking around. Try Skylum, try On One, try DxO. Look around a little bit and see what the alternatives are, and just be happy, obviously, that Lightroom is not 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks a month. It's 10 bucks thrown in with old Photoshop-y, thanks to Adobe. All right. That is the only question I'm seeing so far. Guys and gals, if you do have questions, they'll show up directly if you go to the live feed over at Andy McSweeney Photography. So feel free to check that out and leave a comment. Let's click through some other photos. I'm going to show you just what I've done in these in the sense of, well, not very much. This works out, I think, for the whole feedback side of things, fairly straightforward and easy. Let's flat out reset this shot so that you can see that, you know, I'm shooting a little bit dark to get my highlights out of control so that when my edits are done, I pull up the exposure, maybe play with the shadows, but not in this case, and mess around a little bit. All right. Not a thrilling shot, but something to show. I think I padded out and chose too many photos beforehand. What can I say? Hello, wife. You probably heard her come in. This microphone is very sensitive. Another street scene in Paris. As you can see over that week, we had some time wandering the streets. It's pretty much what we do on holiday, so it works well for us. And I'd say for the whole feedback in general towards getting photos of a place that, you know, say something about the place. Look out for stuff that happens over and over. The Red French Cafe brasseries are all over the place and definitely a story of Paris. Whoops. But yeah, with those two shots, I've at least got a theme going on. And one of the feedbacks I sometimes have to people and myself when I come back from a holiday shoot is, where's the stuff that stood out and happened over and over? So at least two cafe shots and playing around will serve you well there. This scene, I think for some feedback, is working out fairly well. I used the classic chrome filter because I found the red one just looked a little bit too plain. And yeah, just toning it down a little bit worked out real well instantly through Fuji's camera, classic chrome. And next to that, I did the usual tricks, playing with highlights, shadows, and so forth. Because I'm using RAWs, like we talked about earlier, everything tends to work out real nice as far as flexibility compared to a JPEG. And this might be a photo where, on the feedback from me to me, where I might go into black and white and see if it pops a little bit better as far as the clarity on the storytelling. In the end, I think I lose some depth in color compared to black and white. Excuse me, black and white compared to color. This works out fairly well, and we've got some nice bright areas to catch the eye, and the crowd, I think, is a nice human element that pulls things together. However, frankly, if I add the color back, I think it draws in the eye just that little bit more. And since I've kept the colors faded through this camera filter setting, which, let's just put it back to one that isn't, and instead turn down the vibrance to about there. Well, yes, that will bring out the character and mood and catch the eye with that red. Red is an especially useful color in this case to be able to draw the eye also. So goody there. Moving through a few random shots of the artist's corner up in Montmartre. Just a little street photography for you folks to think about. I don't know if there's much feedback I can give on these. This one, I think, works well in the current black and white. Nice, sharp, contrasty. Seeing the artwork, seeing the dude behind it. Not too many people behind him, so that we're not distracted too far. And the bricks add a bit of framing. I could... Oh, look at that. I've already cropped the photo. I could crop it a little further to get rid of that corner sign. And maybe move it down. And that might bring it home a little more. Yeah. That would work out a little better. Heart of the story. And another one of the street. God, I love Paris. Do you love Paris? She loves Paris. The wife doesn't have to be on camera. That's part of the deal of her keeping me company up here. Yeah, kids, I think this all works out well. You know, going back to the feedback from viewers, which I want to see a little more of next time around, kids. Well, I might increase the vignette a little bit aggressively in this case. This is getting very, very aggressive. But see how I'm really drawing in compared to there? Yep. This is something editing-wise that's an old trick, but a good trick. Really adds that intimacy and drawing your viewers right to where you want them. Moving on through there, a little Français booby, but only in painting form, so Facebook should let us get away with that. Moving on to the street markets, one of the ones that we visited, whose name, of course, escapes me. This kind of shot for the whole feedback side of things. Let's look at it just a little more without the control panel. Yeah, this photo, guys and gals and otherwise, works out fine. I think in black and white we have a great improvement as far as the simplicity and just bringing home the story in 1, 2, punch, punch, punch kind of way. Zoo, zoo, zoo. So I think black and white is definitely going to play well. And same story here. This I'm quite happy with in the feedback kind of way. I think this is also one where we can show that backstage, aside from my usual changes, I did some extra work. That is a tool known as the brush tool in Lightroom. Let me just draw it up here. And you can see the exposure was set to 1.0 so that the areas that I've already brushed over go like that. I told you I had one pass through, and this stuff somehow sticks in my brain more than what time am I meeting that person. One thing I would say when you use the brush tool, let me just undo that in fact because I got ahead of myself. If I press O, as in the letter O on the keyboard in Lightroom, I'll pull up my opacity viewer there, and you can see where I've done my brush strokes already. What I would do, lads and lassies, is just clean up my mess after doing my brushing. You can see there's no real need for that excess red, which will soon be a full stop of exposure outside of the candles, outside of the heart. So why don't we just clean that up real quick and make things happy, hunky-dory there. I could then, of course, clean up my cleanup by just filling that heart back in. And when we look at it, well, doesn't that look pretty? It certainly looks a little more attractive than there. Not that this is too terrible, but me wanting to draw a little more attention to that shield and the candles means that, well, it's worth my while breaking out that brush tool. So yay for that, and I guess the rest of it I think came together fairly well. If we look on the specs of what I shot it at, let's go to the aperture number of f2.8. You can see that softened out the background really well, and because I was zooming in and fairly close to the object, no problem for a soft background there. I might have actually benefited from going up to f3.5 or even 4.0 for a little bit more detail. So that's a little thought to consider, but I think overall this worked, and aside from maybe a little bit of black and white crunchiness to work out after on the contrast, things played. We played well. All right, taking a quick look for the questions, comments. Nope, we're safe. Nobody's too crazy there. Chris Luminar 4 tried that but wasn't too sure. Topaz Studio 2 was very good for overall quality but quite slow to actually make the adjustments. Sorry, these aren't questions. That's totally fine, mate. I love a bit of dialogue and talk here on the show because, hey, it's part of the fun. Are we having fun yet? I like to think I am. And that fun hopefully will carry on much, much more, friends. As I said, this is going at least 2 weekly, and it might even go weekly as far as me jumping on air on a Sunday evening. Let me know in the comments. I know you're watching this at some point because I do get statistics, not of your names and your addresses. But yeah, stuff is seen, so do not be shy. Looks like my camera just popped out too because we're such professionals here. So, hello again. You get to see the whole room because it goes to wide angle by default. Ooh, there you go. I'll cover some of my privacy. Oh, look at that. It's a bat cave now. Great. Aren't I a super pro? Well, I know how to adjust a tripod quickly. So hello again. There we go. That's done. Now you can see the microphone even more. Ladies and germs, let us continue to feedback from beautiful Paris with your photos shown by yourself. Photos shown by yourself. What am I doing on air? Yeah, photos. I'm I've had my first big TV live fail. Ladies and gentlemen, photos by me, fed back by me. I'm ripping myself a new one. And you're welcome to submit your photos for the next one. All right, little bits of Paris and little things to think about. I think all this worked out just fine. We don't have too much to say. Yeah, we did not use any brushes there, so we maybe could go back on this one like I was talking about and add a little bit more draw to the eye. See what's happening in this sense. Yeah, maybe bring out some of that character in life. Look at that, going from the bad jokes and the total fails straight to let's do feedback. Change the subject, huh? Da, 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 da. Hey kids, if I get used to this, maybe I'll be the next Bob Ross. We can all get real mellow and talk about editing and how you got to work with the colors and turn with the flow. And, you know, your black and whites should have a texture of life and character. Ladies and gentlemen, more of beautiful Paris in little bits and pieces. Street photography to me includes all sorts of stuff. So if I pass just even the smallest of markets and I see something like that, well, then why not? I'd say for my greater audience, it's probably not the most thrilling photo to show them in the mix. So, you know, watch out for that, for getting back to the feedback side of things. This is a well-known corner of Paris, and I think this kind of shot works out. This is probably something that's at least, you know, for a random one or the other compared to that, going to stick a little more in your viewers' eyes if they're tuning in for the street photography in particular. And I think major Paris landmarks also, we can say this is a rather well-known corner in a central area. And then moving through Paris in all its beautiful glory, you can see street photography really took over while I was wandering around those streets because, hey, you work with what you got. And I love street photography. I think this kind of shot, I can't really give much feedback other than maybe asking to see the color and saying this is all well and fine, but black and white worked out pretty well in this case. We could also add some vignetting like we've talked about before. And I'm changing the midpoint as I go so you can see. Not too aggressively because that's kind of giving it away. But maybe just accentuating some of the light that's already going on with a well-controlled vignette. We might get something to work with. And taking it away from the lights down mode, you can see. Again, I'm shooting with my highlights down, my shadows up, and my exposure up. Because I'm wild like that. You can also see I'm wild enough to go up to people and say, hello, j'ai pris votre photo. I have taken your photo, sir. Do you mind? 9 times out of 10, they don't mind. And he was one of those 9, so that was worth it for me. And you can see that I got to do an extra little photo from there. You know, that photo, I don't think really destroys his privacy or gives away to the wife that he might be at the mistress. But I do check, and then sometimes I use that opportunity to say, hey, can I get another photo? Just from what I saw there while I was chit-chatting to him. So fun little piece, I think, and not much to feedback there. This is also a situation. Let's check the vignetting. Yes, that indeed I have taken the numbers for a bit of a ride in playing around with the vignetting. If we turn off the vignetting, look at that. Not so engaging, not so thrilling, not so exciting. So we focus the story by just using vignetting right there. I think today's word is vignetting. Vignetting. For anyone who's still crazy enough to be listening, here we are with this monsieur who is playing his beautiful accordion. He was kind enough to let me take some photos, and this is again, and part of why I preach about, you know, doing this in street photography, going up to him and saying, hello, hi, would you mind if I take some photos? And he said, okay. And it was that easy. I actually wanted to use the fisheye in this situation, as I think you can see in the optics, which for feedback sometimes might be considered a minus, but I think for this scene worked out just fine. I also found, by the way, before we get into the shots, that it was really a nice benefit to talk to him for a few minutes because I speak French, and just ask him about his music, where he's from. Is he from Paris? How often does he come out? What kind of music does he love? all these kind of things just add to the intimacy that I might be able to get from my subject when I go in for the wide angle or even fisheye level shot. So saying hello and having a petit peu de confidence is not the worst thing in the world, boys and girls. And when we scroll through the shots, well, you can see I have to fix my vignetting compared to that last shot, and let's do just that. But distant, close, but, keeping my distance, more intimate, even more intimate, and of course, intimacy through detail. All these shots worked out, I think, pretty okay. The fisheye can be rather crazy on distortion, so let's just take a peek and you can see backstage what I did there. No transform, but lens corrections. Didn't even touch it on the distortion. If we wanted to talk about that in the whole feedback sense, I could do something like this, and I don't think I'd be breaking the photo too critically. There we go. Change that up. Oh, and while I was shooting this, you can see, boys and girls, in this bottom left-hand corner of his elbow in the frame, that's my shadow, which I believe on the next shot is missing, minimized. But that little thing you want to watch out for when we get into the hard feedback side of things. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I will be offering private feedback real soon. I'm just putting the bows and I's and T's getting crossed and dotted respectively. So if you contact me for that, feel free, and know that it will be a little more focused than my ramblings about Paris. Especially we won't be live on Facebook for whatever that means. Let's see. Is anyone even still here? Oh, my dear Lord, some people are still watching. You fools. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you dropping by. I do need a little sip of liquids, though, so let's scroll through some photos till we find something. Ah, the love wall in Paris. Oh, that feels good. Here's something to think about in the street photography, friends. This has a nice intimacy and closeness, but I think the context of the surroundings isn't really telling the story I was going for there. Look at what happens when I take a wide shot. And I know it's not I love you in your language probably, but it is I love you, and it's written a few more times on the wall. And you can see it contributed nicely to an end result. But street photography, getting close, see what you can do. Sometimes close is a little too close. Although I got to admit, this one's a little too far too, and should have had a polarizing filter on so that that reflection of the building didn't show up and you saw all the different translations of the word love. Okay, we're off and kicking. Now we're at the markets again. Oh, look at that. They're a little out of order. This is where a fisheye is very interesting, and I think on the feedback side of things, I can't fault myself too hard on this one. Taking it into black and white made sense versus sitting in color because it looks a little bland, and then you have a lot of color elements that can end up distracting, particularly that little chunk of red in the bottom right corner. So let's take it back to black and white and see what we can see. Nice connection with the subject. He's looking towards me. It might be a little more interesting if he had been looking right at me, but also then I guess I would have been busted, and that would shift the focus a little heavy. For this kind of shot, I think it plays out well. It tells the story of a market. It's a little unfocused, or I guess not unfocused, because I can tell that, I'm trying to tell the story of all this stuff and bits and pieces for sale. But this might be where that fella in the corner might actually take away from the story. I'd have to judge that one up a little more deeply, and who needs to lose time, especially when we have photos that also, have a lot of life but have no story whatsoever. This is the kind of photo that I definitely wouldn't say would make a portfolio shot, or I don't know, anything that I'd put forward beyond just showing you maybe not what not to do in street photography. It's not that this shot is an absolute fail. There's basic focus and interest and all that, but I don't think you can feel too much excitement to what's going on unless I'm not feeling it and you are or something. Because, you're here to tell a story, and a bunch of people standing around like this, I don't think quite captures the moment that I was looking for there. Moving through, same story here. This is a photo that I got to tut-tut myself in the whole feedback way. I remember this moment quite clearly too, because I wanted to get this fella's photo, so I talked to him for a couple minutes. At the end, he just kind of stood there, like I was going to do a close-up head and shoulders shot or something. So I took it and went with it, especially as I mean, everything was fine with him and me, but I just didn't have the energy to sort of chase it out, that particular shot. I mentioned this was holiday for me and the missus, so I'm not going to spend 20 minutes on one guy unless it's really worth it with the accordion. And even then, I can only do that one time per holiday for Mrs. Andy. Yeah, she's coughing in the background. So yeah, this photo, I think perfectly fine photo of the crepe maker. I'm sure if I sent him a copy or his family had a copy, they'd be happy with it. But for me, I don't know if it really tells too much of a story beyond him looking in the distance. And if we're doing the feedback thing of what can work, but I think in this case doesn't. Is that me? That's me in the corner. Look at that. I'm in the mirror. Okay, for the meta Andy in an Andy photo, that's great. But otherwise, I think it's just a bit of fail. So no to this photo, ho. Onwards and upwards. A decent little street scene that I took fairly tight and I think works out okay. This is the kind of shot where immediately I'm reaching for my crop tool. And as you see going up to the top right corner, I'm just getting rid of that little bit of brickwork. That's because it immediately, to me, takes away that extra little bit of distraction and color that might not really do this scene any favors. I mean, going to black and white for this one obviously solves our color problems, but I think in this case, color is kind of fun to work with, especially as we have that couple in the corner lit up and just overall some nice splotches of light to sort of spread through the scene to do something a little different for a street shot. Editing-wise, I think it's the usual tricks, kids. You can see it if you like. The exposure up because I shoot a little bit down and then highlights down. Texture clarity all getting bumped up. Maybe if I took it a little less aggressively. Yeah, I think for the couple, you zoom in on them without the heavy clarity bump going on. It's to their benefit. So that's nice. And then on from there to rip up photos, or at least hope that they're decent enough not to embarrass myself, even if they're for feedback. Well, this is one along the River Seine, which I think plays well. You could think about deleting that sign up in the top left corner, as I am right now with the mouse and the healing tool. Look at that. That is how easy it is with technology to delete things. Although sometimes you might have to rearrange it. Oh, no, not in this case. Of course, we want to keep those going steady from there to there. So that works out. But of course, if you're not into deleting things in your street photography, that might break the rules that you set up on yourself. So I guess for the whole feedback side of things, this works out. But maybe even zoom in a little more aggressively to this one. And while we're at it, look on the other side how these windows just get repeated and then cut off. Let's subtract out anything boring. Maybe play with our framing for a fine tune. And that might play just a little more interestingly. Also note, boys and girls, that the highlights are down, but maybe they could be down a little more if I wanted just that extra little bit of texture on the yellow door. I could, of course, go through with the brush tool and mess around. It's set to bright by default just for my needs, but I could go a little bit darker or even darker still. That's more dark than I want, but it's an option. Hey, things and stuff, and I'm hoping it's helping you on your photography. Okay, onwards, upwards, a little more Paris street photography in this scene. Yep, that works out pretty okay, but I think not really coming together as a super exciting shot. There's a lot of good elements that I feel personally interested and excited about this, especially the dominant green and the couple going on. It just played really well when I shot it, or at least to my mind. But I think focus-wise, she's a little bit soft and not really doing any favors for it compared to that street light, which is, you know, way too sharp. So got to watch out for those things, but something that you shoot and maybe you don't always use after in the long-term portfolio. This one I really like. It's a personal favorite. I've noticed it doesn't get huge likes on Instagram or any of that, which is beyond my caring, but I love it. I mean, in the personal memory way, this was also on my birthday, so good memory connector there. And of course, when we zoom in, you can see for the street photographer in me that I am extremely pleased to get a nice iconic something for street photography. So rather pleased with that, and feedback-wise, can't argue too hard. Maybe I could play with the vignetting a bit to be a little more gentle, or maybe if not too gentle. You see I'm taking that midpoint in. That means here, let's make it darker so you can really see it. When I take the midpoint in, I'm really zooming in on that area. To be honest, though, this is one of the drawbacks I find with Lightroom. You can't recenter that vignette, so you got to be careful that you don't make the glass too dark in one side compared to the other when you do this kind of thing. All right, boys and girls, that's Andy on his birthday. You will get embarrassing photos every now and then without any warning, so that's me on my birthday having fun on my bicicleta. It is my bicicleta, and I love it dearly. My wife knows exactly what I'm talking about. And there she is, being shown on air, chasing pussy, cats. This is at the cemetery of, well, one of the many cemeteries of Paris. We went to 3 or 4 of them, didn't we, dear? Père Lachaise and Montmartre and a couple of others. We're on air, so we'll try not to have too much dead air. And this photo, my friends, for the feedback side of things, I think is perfectly pleasant, and I have 0 complaints about, because it's my cute wife looking cute. I could bring in the vignetting, and actually I will, just to bring in the intimacy. And as a matter of fact, if I haven't already, let's break out the brush tool and just bring out a little bit of character on my dear darling's face before making that a little more natural looking in the end. So, super content avec ça, super happy with that, and hope it helps you on your photo journey. Taking a break is good. We have a little bit of luxury on holiday, and, well, coffee is a daily luxury, but look at that. I got to have a cigarette, and it tasted so good. One cigarette. One. Every now and then. One. It's good to breathe fresh air, though. Like I am on this beautiful day in Paris, where I'm standing right by the Eiffel Tower. Feedback-wise, I am très content. I'm a little bit maybe off-center in the sense that, well, let's see. Whoops. Yep, if we look at our cropping and framing, if we go with my original, it's all right. And slightly cropped in also worked, but I think actually made it just a little off-center. So spotting that and fixing that. I would say also, mes amis, that I am very happy here. You can see I've got a little bit of funkiness going on with the bird in the corner, so I might be tempted to Photoshop or just Lightroom him out. I mean, I'm happy with that object in the frame, and you know, the symbol of it with freedom, flight, 10 other things that you can say when you see a bird in a picture towards the imagination. However, the fact that it is so far out of focus and a little bit blurry might not get me that stock image purchase that I'm looking for. And speaking of which, as I zoom in, oh boy, you can see these photos have only had the first pass. Look at that dust in the corner, whether it's on the sensor or the lens. Got to look out for that and got to clean it up afterwards. That'll do just for demo purposes while we're recording live on Facebook. Next day on youtube.com/Andy McPhoto. Look at that, sneaking in the plug and cleaning up the dirt and taking names. There were also, I believe, some insects. No, that's another bird. I'm thinking of something else. That one, well, that one maybe could stay, could go. We only cleaned up the dirt, but let's get rid of at least one bird. Hey, and if it doesn't look perfect when you do cloning like that, just remember that Lightroom is not exactly the cutting edge for that. For that, you'll probably want to fire up Photoshop and do it proper and correct. Okay, moving on the photos and just showing you a little more of La Vie Paris. A little detail, a little abstract that played well, I think. And you can see my settings exactly, so that's where I'm pushing things around. This is another shot also where I boosted up the color because I just found that it popped in a way that I found that afternoon popped. And a third angle of the old Eiffel Tower just to keep things interesting and play around a little bit, hey? What do we got? Oh, we also have, like I mentioned, the haze and the pollution that was going on during that week in Paris. But we also have a nice little silhouette going on from the Eiffel Tower. And, you know, just another reason, another situation, I think, where keeping a slightly long zoomy lens can be handy, because this was taken probably about a half kilometer away. And this is one of my favorites of the trip as far as landscape goes. Okay, I was trying to look over at the screen to see how it was going for time and all that subtly, but it didn't work. We're back though. Let's make sure that everything is working broadcasting wise. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, a little more Paris to keep you entertained. There is a nice street market scene that I think played out fairly well. You can see it was Christmas time too, so we have a couple of ornaments in the corner. That isn't a huge scratch on my sensor. It's just is what it is. And I think framing wise, you can see that I took it in a little bit because I actually shot it a fair bit wider as far as that goes, and then just went in a little bit closer. So quick feedback on framing there. I think that played out nice. This is, I think, a benefit of going low to the ground if you're doing a nice wide landscape shot. This is also the kind of shot where very, very happy I'm shooting in RAW. You can see I turned down my highlights, and even without my shadows getting boosted up, because who needs it in this scene? Well, I'm getting some interesting stuff going on. I also might, in this sense, consider fixing the perspective slightly, just making it a little bit straighter. You can see it's not exactly breaking the scene, but it's not exactly hurting it to make that more correct in its straightness. Usually after you do it, you can see it's radically different to what you thought. And, well, as we move through, you can see the benefit of taking it through Nik Collection. For those of you who missed the opening of the show, I talked about night photography and just pulling the most out of an image that you can. And that image, whoops, there to there, that's what's sitting inside one photo. I believe that, or it's a RAW. Nope, it's one photo. So that is the single image taken in RAW, pushed around in Lightroom a little bit, and then pushed around further in Color Effects Pro in this case. So worth keeping in mind. And also going back to what Chris brought up, not in question, but in good comment, because I like comments while we're broadcasting. It keeps me on my toes. Well, the software options are pretty open there. Look at Luminar, like I was talking about, Chris, and otherwise. If you're not into Lightroom, especially with their monthly subscription fee, you can think about other software that extracts just like this does, either for free in some cases or low payments. Okay, let's move on and forward. There is a little corner of Montmartre that looked real pretty, and also using the fisheye lens, believe it or not. Let's just go to it as far as the cropping, because you can see with the fisheye lens, I'm going to have to be undoing that fisheye effect. In fact, if we just reset the whole thing, you can see, whoops, what happened there? Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go. You can see I had to give up a fair bit of building and everything else there to make sense of that. But at the end of the day, for a corner, fisheye can be really fun, or wide angle even in general. And with distortion corrections, this is from a Samyang 8 millimeters on my Fujifilm. I still have some very okay image quality to play with. Well, I'm just trying to zoom in, boys and girls. There we go. Oh, wow, wow. That's really zoomed in. Okay. Recording all this live apparently likes to mess with Lightroom. Right on. That'll be something for the IT department. Okay, kids, there's an HDR version. I want to show you this just really briefly. Okay. This is where we take 3 photos and smush them all together for the brightness. Whoops. Let me just change modes. And whoop, up, 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 up. Okay. I talked about when you take it through an editor like Color Effects Pro, you really get a little more option as far as how much to pull out of the scene. When you take 3 exposures and put them together as an HDR, like we talked about on Ask Andy, you get that kind of range to choose from. So if you really want all of the sky, all of the shadow, all of the foreground, you got some options there. And, you know, this is where getting to know your photography pays off, boys and girls. So hope this is helping, and let me know in the comments and stuff like that. All right, more of Paris. There is the Louvre, which is certainly one of the most beautiful museums in the world, definitely in Paris. You can see I black and whited it all down because in color it is interesting, but I think not as interesting. To be honest, it's a little distracting having the no walking sticker peeling off here and all the bits and gunk, but it is an interesting angle and I'm happy with it. If I was really bothered by that extra stuff, I'd delete it either in Lightroom or Photoshop. Moving on and through to the streets of Paris, a little more action and life. I thought that faded color worked better than full black and white. So there's a little thought. On the feedback side of things for me, I guess I could say, well, gee, Andy, are you using a fisheye? Because I think it's pretty obvious here. But at the same time, I would say, well, at least, Andy, you're not embarrassing yourself with that fisheye. Because, you know, it's all well and good to mess around, but I'm just looking for my setting, boys and girls. Of course, it's under lens correction. Yeah. You know, we can undo that stuff if you really want to get picky about it. Obviously losing some framing. Woohoo! Or we can just leave it as is. One of the interesting things I find digesting this image for the first time in a while is that, never mind the distortion fix, when I've cropped it a little bit like that compared to before, you can even see it here, that young lady in the corner isn't hitting the frame anymore. So either with distortion fixes or otherwise, I think I've actually gained a little ground here, messing around with the distortion because I've cropped in just that little bit closer. And you see too, with street photography, you just really get some interesting moments. Ooh, that's a little gritty. I think I pushed a little far on the... Yep, I pushed the shadows up a bit hard there, kids. All right, boys and girls, let's move through a little more Paris. That I think is another decent use of the old fisheye. I would say to myself in the feedback way that I'd probably want to mess around with straightening that up a little bit. I mean, you can definitely tell I didn't stand in the middle of the road for that. And by which I'm talking about using the vertical tool. Oops. Why isn't it working like it should? Because we're live on air. Yes, well, normally when I use the vertical tool, it's a little more generous towards correcting perspective. Just take a look at how that building is leaning back and maybe play with normally the vertical tool in Photoshop under Transform. There we go. So that you can straighten that up a little bit. All right, moving through. Oh, Notre Dame. I was very tearful when that fire happened. Okay, this is just sitting the camera on my backpack and going for a 1.6 second exposure, boys and girls. I think on the feedback side of things, we can say that this is nicely in focus and that's nicely in focus. So zippity doo dah day there. No hard fail there. I don't personally mind the action and the motion on this actually. It adds a little more character, having both people that are still and defined, as well as things that are moving around a little, moving around a little bit more. And I guess the hardest thing here is probably just I'm noticing, especially in this corner, that the image is getting a little bit soft and funky. So by that I mean just a little bit of motion is creeping into the frame or something. It's obviously not enough in these corners to be a problem. There's good sharpness and stability. But not packing a tripod was, I think, the worst thing I did here, because there's obviously a little bit of softness and motion going on here that shouldn't be. Gotta look out for those little details. Sexy Paris, sexy Paris. That's all I have to say about that, I guess. Editing-wise and just making feedback for myself, because not enough of you wrote in. Please write in much more next time, boys and girls. I think this deserves a little closer crop. Take a look at this. When I go from that to that, from that, I think I'm just getting a little more into the heart of the story. You know, this frame is dark and you want to get to the point of your narrative that you saw when you snapped this photo, fairly direct. So that little bit of extra framing going shtaboo bye-bye, that can work out just that much nicer for you, hey? Ooh. Let's double check the time, boys and girls. I'm happy to give you all this time, but I don't want to also lose all of you out of boredom. Let's see if there's any questions. Questions are looking quiet here. Questions are looking quiet there. Boy, do I love early times. This is so great. It is actually. There's no pressure when there's not 500 people watching. It's kind of nice. Ladies and gents, what else we got? We have Palookaville with this fisheye, which I think works out well, but to be honest is, well, more just a fun shot than anything else. We have the Moulin Rouge, which in Paris is a major landmark, and I always suggest hitting the landmarks if you're passing by. In this case, we also had a bunch of cars passing by, so different kind of story here. I wanted to show this one partly because it's a personal favorite, just for being something different, instead of like, there's the Moulin Rouge. Wow, I stood there for 2 minutes and waited for cars to go. Well, that guy was parked up, so I had no choice, and I found it actually made the frame a little more interesting. Now, for this one, I think I could go to black and white and get away with just not having the distraction of the colors. I think it works well in this sense, but I think it works better. Whoops, excuse me. A little better. Well, yeah. Could be color. I like color a little more. Yep. I was about to say a whole bunch of stuff, and color isn't the way, because on this one, the cars just become a mess, don't they? At least here, I keep clicking that. Now I guess you can see my working folder for the project. Yeah, in color, it's more three-dimensional, and you can see the blue of the car container is carrying it down the frame a little more. Whereas, I keep pressing the wrong button. There we go. Yes, the correct button will get us black and white, and in this sense, I think it goes a little bit too monotone compared to having color and just having the blue carry you down the frame, or let's say at least give you a chance of making that choice of the photo interesting. Since it was blocked up, I at least got that. So that's in front of the Moulin Rouge, and look out for it for next time. I'd say in the feedback way for this kind of shot, I'm not too hesitant, unlike my street photography, to delete little bits of junk and crap. You know, I don't really need to see that little bit of stuff that's hanging around there. And no, it's not poop. I'm not being polite. Ha ha. There's only a few listeners. I can say what I want. And you can see kids just by using the spot tool a few times over that I'm getting rid of the biggest bits of junk there compared to that. Some of these tiny, but in particular that one and his buddy. Those two have to go in the others. Well, why not? So played well there, and hope helps for your love of Paris, but especially for the kind of photo feedback we're going to be given here on these live casts. Another sip of tea for me, because after an hour and a half, I think I've earned it. Oh, yeah. Ladies and gents, Underneath a Bridge, I think played well. Not much to say there. I'm happy with that. That, I think, is interesting, but frankly isn't super exciting. So it's a photo I'd take, but I don't think it would make the final slideshow of 25, if you will. And same for that. It's all right. Obviously, the contrast between the brickwork, the rocks, the rock and wall work, and the sign are kind of interesting, but it's not really doing much. So unless that road means something to you in particular, maybe not one for the slideshow to the friends. Same goes for that, although it's fun, interesting, abstract textures to you. There's no need to bore your buddies with this. This would be a delete, or at least not to the final slideshow. And if you take a look, I'm just making an adjustment, because if you look in the bottom corner, look at that. This whole chunk of gray compared to all the goodness that's happening here. So I already cropped a bit, and I'll just crop a little bit more real quick. There we go. That's all cleaned up. If I was going to bore my friends, at least I'm not totally suffocating them with lousy or at least slightly messy framing. Onwards and upwards, a leaf against cobblestones. Oh my, that's exciting, but we've seen it all before, so let's not bore anyone there. Don't show this to your friends, even if you're happy with this as a photo. And, well, a detail on a Vespa is kind of funky, but maybe more for your Vespa Club buddies than the general slideshow. I always like the little trick when I'm bored and have a telephoto on to just grab a little chunk of building and play with my balance of empty and busy space. So I think that one's kind of fun, but I think we had better stuff to work with, so let's move through from there. Oh yeah, we can say the same story here. And in fact, this building is, or at least this shot, he says, taking off the darkness, hasn't even had its shadows boosted, so we can get a little more interest and detail out of that building. And since that's not working, if I was going to use this shot because it was the beautiful penthouse B&B that I stayed at, I think I would do the work just like so with the brush tool to bring it all together and bring home the story of that home. As I've mentioned with the brush tool, do be a little bit careful on those dark areas. You might lose some of that natural feeling brushing over them. So do just go gentle, and of course with the erase tool in Lightroom and other non-destructive software, you'll be able to work easy peasy. That compared to that. Things to think about. What else? Oh, ho, ho. Us. For those of you who don't read a word of French, it means us. The locks in Paris make my wife smile immensely as she peeks over from the corner. That shot I think is fine. That shot I think is okay, but I think is actually a little bit busy. So if I had to choose between the two, I would say this versus this for the lock story. It is also such an amazingly famous and well-known story about Paris that I don't think you're going to have to prove to people that, you know, this isn't the only lock in town. And if all that fails and your wide shot of locks don't work out, go in nice and close and see what you can do. I think this one really says a lot more than that one too, particularly as it says Paris right on there on the lock. This is actually the kind of shot where out of the entire holiday I am most pleased, because I feel like I got something that really told the story of the place. And when you get to that top 10, 20, or 30 of photos, It's shots like this that I find starts standing out a little bit more. So there's that, and let's move forward because I think there's a few more Paris, but I don't want to bore you all night. More lock photos, but just a little bit boring and too bright, so not really for the taste I'm going for. This is a city lock, so for a book of Paris, it might be really nice to have not this photo. In fact, let's delete it. This photo and that photo as a pair in a book. Wouldn't that be kind of fun? Yay. The wife's looking over, semi-interested. I'm honored. Okay, ladies and gents, boys and girls, let's talk about things that are super exciting or not in the photography. That is the kind of photo that I don't ever want to see if you ask for a feedback session, because I know it's gritty and I know it's street and I know you saw it, but it's just a pigeon. So please, avoid those kind of photos. At the very least, if you do take them, put them in black and white so the gritty is really proper. And spend more than 2 minutes with those pigeons and you'll probably start seeing something with a little more character. Same goes for this one, I think, in particular. That's all right on that corner by that sign. So instead of going for this, I can go to this, and then I can go to this. And actually with this shot, for the whole feedback making things better thing, well, it wasn't exactly off center. But I think with this one, we would not lose too much by just cropping in a little bit. Pop. That compared to that. That right side is just empty black space. Sometimes that adds to the photo, but in this case, it's not doing much, is it, boys and girls? Okay. Another dirty urban photo of Paris, which I think plays real nice. This is also a shot that obviously in black and white is way more powerful than in color. And I would just say, I was pretty sure that I'd used a brush tool there. So very strange it's not showing up. But that brush tool that we have shown a couple times now, if that sign had been a little darker, I would have made sure to go around and just brighten it up. I think it's fine as it was, but just for quick demo purposes, consider that. Consider that. Flipping through more of beautiful Paris. This is a tape cassette that was on the side of a bridge, taped on, tape to tape. And I believe, nope, we only have one photo of it. This shot I think worked out just fine, but again, for the friends, it might be a little bit of a tricky one if you're going for that no dialogue story of Paris. At the very least, I would play with the color tones like I am currently. I mean, you will start building up a consistent style, I think, with your editing, and you can see mine is fairly playing with the rich and vibrant without hopefully getting into nauseous territory. And you can see again for this one, the clarity has been knocked up all the way to 48 because, well, it just makes it pop that much more, and I think it does the photo a few favors more than harm it. My doggie's moving around. How about that? Can't see it. This is Life Off Camera. Life Off Camera, starring Andy McSweeney and his dog Blake and his wife. Let's not lose any more viewers. Boys and girls, more photos of Paris, little details, little bits and pieces, things that worked out. This is, again, a shot where the vignetting might be a little bit aggressive. Look at that. That is too little, but that is too much. So let's take it to a nice halfway point, and let's maybe just make it smaller by playing with the midpoint setting. Oh, and hey, let's play with the radness while we're here. It ain't perfect, but I think you can see, again, where a vignette is super benefactory when you apply it correctly. All right. How many more of these can I bore you with? Street art in Paris. As many of you know, I love my graffiti. I'm from Montreal, where we worship graffiti quite heavily and long term. So when I see it on the road, I'm a very happy man. And this is, I think, a decent representation of road and graffiti, like the story that I saw in front of me. I gotta say, this kind of trash is not exactly the story I'm looking for. So I certainly would not be super pleased with that. I don't think it adds any context or layering to the story. So if I was ethically minded in no bother kind of way, I could delete it out of reality just like so. Something like that. That takes care of the litter, if you will. And otherwise, what I could do if I was happy with it being there, or at least tolerant of it, what I could do is play with the brush tool and just kind of de-emphasize it a bit. And what I mean by that is I'm going to brush real quick on the cup and clean up my mess around the borders. Then I'm going to go to the snotty tissue. And for a second, we'll make it bright because, of course, we have it set up on the tool to go to +1. But boys and girls, now what we're going to do is we're going to turn the exposure right down to a very low number. We're also going to take the saturation away to 0, -100. Because then, when we clean up a little bit, and this is just a quick sketch version, so please, not final gallery print photo, if you will. Well, kids, when we're done and we kind of cover all our bases, you can see that by darkening these objects and taking away the color, especially for the red cup, that they're a little less noticeable, aren't they? To just give you a quick before and after, and excuse the hackiness of the before and after, that is without the brush I applied. And that's with the brush I applied. So, without and with. Magic. Yeah, if you're going to keep it in the scene, you still got options. Oh, and hey, speaking of options on this one, to just emphasize the street art that little bit more, this is where making the brightness a little bit higher in the white surrounding area of him really pays off, you know? You just jump in, let the technology do its job as far as picking out the area, clean up the surrounding bits that didn't work. You can always press O in Lightroom to see what's going on as far as your selection and clean it up. And when you're done, that compared to that. You want your point of interest and something to draw your audience right in. So just brighten it up and darken up some other elements. You might be in business right there and then. Use the force. That's what I get every time I look at Yoda. What can I say? Yeah. A big fan with the graffiti, boys and girls. Sometimes you might just be correcting out a little bit, like in this case. And since I went so bright by default, I'm probably going to take that down with the brush tool. But yeah, play around. You know, it's not just about taking a photo of Yoda all up close and personal like that. It's about getting a photo of Yoda with his surroundings and telling a story. Just making it your own a little bit more, if you will. You know, play. Play and play. I know this has gotten away from feedback, but I guess this hopefully will help you on your photography. Oh, and look out for that really beautiful street art here. In fact, hey dear, remember this one in particular. Yeah, this one was one of our favorite corners personally, and I was more than happy to take some time and get that story. I have to say too, you know, watch out for little story, you know, when the story doesn't really come together. This has something to it, but this has so much more. And after you show like nice pieces of graffiti, even if you're just showing like that one and that one, I don't think throwing in that one is really going to do you any favors. So if somebody had put this whole portfolio in front of me, this would have been on the delete list immediately. It's not a terrible shot. It's not a horrible shot. It's not an offensive shot to taste or whatever else. It just isn't really doing anything. The textures are telling a story and so are the characters, but nothing worth sharing. Not compared to that or that. Oh, there we go back to that. Let's say to that, you know, something engaging, something that at least stimulates the mind. Look out for that. It's a little more exciting than that. All right, boys and girls, a little more graffiti that is interesting but not really standing out. And then just to finish it off, I think a little bit of the mannequin challenge. I saw these pieces around town. You know, if you put this in front of me and put this in front of me, I think I'd probably choose this just for the extra little bit of story that's there on hand. And if I was going to choose this one, I would just crop in a little bit personally to at least get rid of that last bit of black at the left of the frame and tighten it up just a little bit more to there so that it stays white from one end to the other. This is also where maybe playing with the exposure and let's get in there, pulling down the brightness really pays off. Excuse me, the highlights really pays off. And we're in action. Und then, a few more art pieces, a little more Paris, a little more to enjoy with Zide. I saw him a few times around town, and you can see I made a story of him as far as like just tracking him. Anytime I saw Zide, I grabbed a photo. It was only 3 or 4 times by the time I was done. And I think to finish it off for this session, boys and girls, a beautiful little photo of Paris that I can't really feedback much in the sense other than I just am really happy that I got it. I don't think there's too much to change here. I think a little moving around talk could be done if you want to talk about going from one to the other. Yeah, I mean, this is nice. And this works out okay. I think personally, there we go. That's the one I love. All right. I think it's been a couple of hours. I only marked this down as like an hour 15, but I figured I would end up rambling. So here we are. We got no more questions to worry about here because you are all silent as mice, but viewing at least a few of you. So thank you for viewing. Why don't we leave it there for today and with this beautiful photo of Paris to leave you with. In fact, I can do even one better. Look at this. Look at this. Hey, no Andy. You can see the full photo. Right on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. There's going to be another one of these crazy live shows in 2 weeks, and I hope to see you there. My name is Andy McSweeney of Andy McSweeney Photography, and of course, I'm not going to sign off on you without saying hello full screen. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really want to hear your feedback, so if you have any, please feel free. We lost the camera halfway through, so we're a little more wide angle than usual, but I think if you have feedback, it's going to be more interesting than that. However, if you have feedback on the composition or camera fails or Andy fails, feel free to let me know either privately or publicly. Please also remember that this video goes up the next day on youtube.com/Andy McPhoto. So feel free to check it out there. And obviously feel free to like, share, subscribe, and do all that good stuff that anyone doing content creation on social media has to say at the end of their show. And I'm one of them because I'm going to be doing this on the regular. And I think we're just going to get more used to it and deeper into it as we go. So I hope to see you on that journey. And I thank you for being a part of this journey. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Put down me in any way, shape, or form. Pick up your camera. Get out there and get shooting. Bye-bye.